The Great War, the bloody stalemate of trench warfare, the Russian revolutions of 1917, and the moment the United States entered the conflict. This was the war that was supposed to be over by Christmas. Instead, it became the first truly industrialized slaughter in human history. On 28 June 1914, in the Balkan city of Sarajevo, a single gunshot ended the life of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. Within weeks, alliances hardened, mobilization orders were signed, and Europe stepped into a catastrophe it could no longer control. By August 1914, the armies of the world's great powers were on the move. Germany, France, Britain, Russia, Austria-Hungary, soon joined by empires stretching from Canada to India. What followed would reshape borders, destroy empires, and scar an entire generation. Little did they know, this conflict would become known as the Great War, a struggle defined by trenches filled with mud and blood, revolutions born from hunger and despair, and a new power from across the Atlantic that would tip the balance at the final hour. By the summer of 1914, Europe was a continent armed to the teeth. Decades of nationalism, imperial rivalry, and militarism had created a fragile balance. Once it cracked, there was no stopping the slide into war. Germany, newly unified and industrially powerful, relied on the Schlieffen Plan, a bold strategy calling for a rapid strike through Belgium to knock France out of the war in 6 weeks before turning east to face Russia. France, still haunted by defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, prepared Plan 17, an aggressive offensive to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine. Britain, bound by treaty, pledged to defend Belgian neutrality. Russia, vast but slow to mobilize, prepared to defend Serbia and challenge Austria-Hungary. By September 1914, the illusion of a short war was shattered at the First Battle of the Marne. German forces were halted just 30 miles from Paris. As both sides dug in to avoid annihilation by modern artillery and machine guns, a continuous trench line formed, from the North Sea to the Swiss border. This was the birth of trench warfare. Soldiers lived underground, surrounded by mud, rats, lice, and death. Opposing trenches were often separated by just 200 yards of no man's land, a killing field swept by Maxim and MG-08 machine guns. Artillery, such as the German 77mm field gun and the French 75mm Model 1897, dominated the battlefield. Strategically, the war had frozen. Tactically, it had become a nightmare. By 1915, the Western Front had become a grinder of men and material. Offensives were measured not in miles gained, but in yards purchased with thousands of lives. At Ypres, chlorine gas drifted across Allied lines, introducing chemical warfare to the modern battlefield. Soldiers clawed at their throats as lungs burned from within. Gas masks soon became as essential as rifles. By July 1916, British and French commanders launched a massive offensive along the River Somme. The plan was simple: bombard German positions for 7 days, then advance. Over 1.5 million shells were fired. At 0730 hours on 1 July 1916, British infantry climbed out of their trenches. German machine guns were still intact. By nightfall, the British Army had suffered 57,000 casualties, including 19,240 dead, the bloodiest day in its history. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the situation was no less dire. Russia's armies, poorly equipped and badly led, collapsed under German pressure at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes. Millions were taken prisoner. At home, food shortages worsened. Railways failed. The Tsar's authority weakened with every passing month. By 1917, the war had consumed entire societies, and something was about to break. In February 1917, Petrograd, once St. Petersburg, erupted. Bread riots turned into mass demonstrations. Soldiers refused orders to fire on civilians. Within days, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, ending 3 centuries of Romanov rule. Russia's provisional government vowed to continue the war, but the army was already disintegrating. Discipline collapsed.
desertions numbered in the hundreds of thousands. By October 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power. Their promise was simple: peace, land, and bread. In March 1918, Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, exiting the war and ceding vast territories to Germany. For Germany, this was a moment of opportunity. Nearly 50 divisions were transferred from the Eastern Front to the West. One final gamble remained. At the same time, across the Atlantic, the United States was watching closely. German U-boat warfare, unrestricted and relentless, had sunk neutral shipping. The Lusitania was gone. The Zimmermann telegram, intercepted in January 1917, revealed Germany's attempt to draw Mexico into war against the United States. On 6 April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, yet the army was small, its soldiers untested. Could they arrive in time?
In March 1918, Germany launched the Spring Offensive, Operation Michael. Stormtroopers punched through British lines using infiltration tactics. Paris once again came under artillery fire. For a moment, it seemed the Allies might collapse. But then, fresh troops began to arrive. By mid-1918, over 1 million American soldiers were in France under General John J. Pershing. Unlike exhausted European armies, these men were well-fed, confident, and determined. Pershing insisted they fight as an independent force. At Belleau Wood, U.S. Marines stopped a German advance cold. "Retreat? Hell, we just got here," one officer reportedly said. The cost was brutal, but the line held. In August 1918, the Allies launched the 100 Days Offensive. Coordinated attacks using tanks, aircraft, artillery, and infantry shattered German defenses. At Amiens, the German army called it the Black Day. Against impossible odds, the stalemate was broken. What happened next would become legendary. By November 1918, German forces were retreating on all fronts. At home, revolution spread. The Kaiser abdicated. On 11 November 1918, at 1100 hours, an armistice was signed in a railway carriage in the Compiègne forest, France. The war was over. The cost was staggering. 16 million dead, more than 20 million wounded, entire regions reduced to wasteland. Empires vanished: German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian. New nations emerged, fragile and divided. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh terms on Germany, sowing the seeds of another war. For the soldiers who survived, the legacy was lifelong. Shell shock, lost limbs, memories that never faded. Medals were awarded, monuments were built, but nothing could truly repay the price paid in the trenches. The Great War was meant to end all wars. Instead, it taught humanity how to wage them on an industrial scale. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to Past Horizon as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.